If you thought 1993's Super Mario Bros. Was bad, buckle up! Alone in the Dark redefines the phrase poor adaptation and the words acting, directing, and movie.
Your mother's wrong, kid. Being afraid of the dark is what keeps most of us alive.
It's easy to forget how bad video game adaptations were in the early 2000s, and one of the worst to come out of this era was 2005's Alone in the Dark. Based on the series of brooding horror games of the same name, this laughable action movie has a whopping 9 out of 100 Metacritic score. Based on 2001's Alone in the Dark: The New Nightmare, the movie stars Christian Slater as protagonist Edward Carnby and Tara Reid as archaeologist Aline Sedrak. There are a lot of problems with the movie, but director Uwe Boll might be the root of them all.
Just give me 5 minutes, alright? I can explain everything.
Boll has already directed one terrible video game adaptation, 2003's House of the Dead, and it doesn't look like he learned much from that experience. In a February 2005 blog post, one of the movie's first draft screenwriters described how Boll blatantly disregarded the source material's plot and tone. He wanted Carnby to have superhuman abilities like Blade, and he envisioned Alone in the Dark as an action joint full of monster fighting, epic chase scenes, and island lairs. The screenwriters tried to push back, but Boll stood his ground.
The hair on the back of my neck just stood up.
The product of Boll's vision is laughable CGI and career-low performances by the cast. And that opinion is not unique to angry gamers who couldn't accept the adaptation. Even critics on Rotten Tomatoes gave the film a 1% approval rating. The consensus reads, "Inept on almost every level, Alone in the Dark may not work as a thriller, but it's good for some head-slapping, incredulous laughter. But when it's not being unintentionally funny, Alone in the Dark could easily put you to sleep." As a reviewer for The Hollywood Reporter stated, "Even Pong the movie would have a lot more personality." Reviewers across the board took issue with everything from the movie's pacing to its special effects and dialogue.
Will one of you tell me what the hell's going on here?
We picked up massive readings.
That's not what I asked. What the hell's going on here?
Some people were so bothered by how terrible the movie is that they took personal stabs at the individuals involved. As Variety wrote, "Alone in the Dark offers ample evidence that House of the Dead helmer Uwe Boll should put down his joystick quickly before anyone else gets hurt." And the actors weren't spared either. A reviewer for Boston.com quipped, "Think of the lamest horror movie you've ever seen. Now think of Tara Reid in the lamest horror movie you've ever seen. See how much worse it could have been?" Somehow, despite all the disdain and negative reviews, Alone in the Dark still got a sequel in 2008. For better or worse, Alone in the Dark 2 tells a completely original story. And while Boll let the writers of the first film helm the sequel, he stayed on as a producer. Unsurprisingly, Slater and Reid sat this one out. The direct-to-video movie brought back Edward Carnby, this time played by Rick Yoon, for another supernatural adventure. It scored an 11% audience rating on Rotten Tomatoes, but doesn't have a tomato score meter, let alone a Metacritic page. Even worse, viewers claim this one doesn't even have the accidentally funny charm of the previous film. It's just outright bad. And while it's not entirely the film's fault, the Alone in the Dark series has never quite reached its early heights. A star-studded reimagining of the original Alone in the Dark was released in 2024 to disappointing reception. As for Boll, he made several more video game adaptations that flopped, challenged several of his critics to a boxing match, retired from filmmaking and then came back. His film First Shift came out in 2024, and the prospect of even more Boll films is more terrifying than any of the quote-unquote horror he's released in the past.